All right, let's talk pirates. But forget the eye patches, the parrots, all that stuff, the romantic image. Total gone. The reality of modern piracy right now in 2025 is, well, it's a really sophisticated, high stakes criminal operation. And it's a major threat to global trade, to maritime safety, happening as we speak. Now, before we dive into this really fascinating topic today, look, if you're searching for more great insights, more deep dives just like this one, you absolutely have to check out Mind Expansion Daily. Seriously, it's a goldmine of information. It's designed to get you up to speed quickly on a huge range of subjects. And hey, while you're there, if you like what you're hearing today, please take just a second to like and subscribe to Mind Expansion Daily. Wherever you get your deep dives, it genuinely helps us reach more curious people like you. Also, if you find value in these discussions, if you want to help us keep bringing you this kind of info, you can always buy us a coffee. The link for that is right there in the description. Easy to find. And finally, we really do love hearing from you. So after you listen to our summary today, challenge yourself, drop a comment below. Tell us, do you agree with our take? Disagree? Let us know. And look, our goal is to expand our reach worldwide, so we'd love it if you'd also mention where you're tuning in from. Okay, so today's mission. We are going to unpack this persistent, always evolving threat of modern piracy. We'll look at how it's changed, where the main hotspots are, understand the massive costs, both economic and human. We'll touch on some recent big incidents and then examine the ongoing, pretty complex efforts to actually fight back. And just to give you a sense of the urgency here, the International Maritime Bureau, the IMB, they reported a staggering 50% jump in piracy incidents in just the first quarter of 2025 compared to last year. So this isn't some old story. It's adapting fast.
Yeah, it's really striking, isn't it, how far removed this reality is
Yeah.
from those old, Jack Sparrow type tales, and just how strategically these criminal networks operate now. It's a truly global issue, and it really does touch all of us, even if we don't always see it directly.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Mhm.
When we talk about this new breed of pirate, what does that actually look like? Operationally, technology-wise, how did we get from, simple smash and grab raids to these complex operations?
Well, it's a fundamental shift, really. It's gone way beyond just opportunistic attacks.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing highly organized crime networks,
Mm.
and they're using technology that, frankly, historical pirates couldn't even have dreamed of. We're talking high-speed boats, GPS for pinpoint navigation, military-grade weapons, things like AK-47s, even RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades. It's
Yeah.
a very different kind of fight out there.
Wow, RPGs. That's a whole different level of armament.
So given this shift in their capabilities, how has that changed who or what they target? Are they still just hitting ships at random, or is it more focused now? Oh, much more focused. Incredibly strategic, actually. They're not just randomly attacking vessels anymore. They are deliberately targeting ships on critical maritime routes. Think places like the Singapore Strait, the Gulf of Guinea. These are major choke points. Something like 90% of global trade by volume passes through areas like these, so they're extremely lucrative targets.
Makes sense. Go where the money is.
Exactly. And the numbers show it. The IMB tracked 116 incidents worldwide in 2024. Out of those, pirates actually boarded 94 vessels. They took 126 crew members hostage. That hostage number, it's way up from 73 the year before in 2023.
Huge jump.
It really is. And what's quite interesting, you could almost think of modern piracy like a grim, agile startup. They constantly pivot their business model. Sometimes it's cargo theft. Other times it's kidnapping for ransom. They adapt directly based on whatever anti-piracy measures are out there. They iterate. They find ways around maritime security. It's not just more attacks. It shows how adaptable they are. They use tactics like multi-boat swarming. They have intelligence networks tracking valuable ships. It's sophisticated stuff.
An agile startup. That's a chilling way to put it. So, okay, beyond just making money, what's really driving these operations? Is it still just treasure, or are there deeper things going on?
Well, primarily, yes, it's financial. No doubt about it. They go after high-value goods, oil, electronics, sometimes just cash on board. But increasingly, particularly somewhere like the Gulf of Guinea, the main driver is ransom from kidnappings. Just look at 2024. About 23% of all crew members taken hostage globally were captured right there. And what allows them to operate so effectively often is local support. This is often fueled by really deep-seated poverty and, frankly, corruption in some areas. This lets them set up bases, places like Nigeria's Delta State or over in Indonesia's Riau Archipelago. It's this mix of economic desperation and criminal organization.
Right. So with these methods, these motivations, where are the biggest hotspots now? Where are these groups really thriving?
Yeah, good question. Piracy today, in 2025, is really concentrated in three main regions. You've got the Gulf of Guinea, the Indian Ocean, particularly off Somalia, and then Southeast Asia. And what's interesting is that each area has its own kind of unique factors driving things and a different style of operating, you could say.
Okay, let's start with the Gulf of Guinea then. We keep hearing it described as the, quote, world's piracy epicenter. Seems like it accounts for most incidents globally. What makes it so dangerous?
That description is pretty accurate, unfortunately. In just the first quarter of 2025, 13 crew members were abducted there in only 2 separate incidents. And these pirates, they operate with incredible reach, sometimes 300 nautical miles offshore. They use these fast boats, military-style coordination. The big challenge is often weak maritime governance, political instability in coastal nations like Nigeria, Benin, Togo. It just allows these organized gangs to flourish and target ships, especially oil tankers and cargo vessels.
300 miles out. That's audacious.
It is, and sometimes it gets incredibly violent. There was a really harrowing incident in Equatorial Guinea in 2024. 9 crew members were held hostage for nearly a month. It just highlights the violent nature of piracy there and the huge risks seafarers face.
That paints a really grim picture, the human cost. We definitely need to talk more about that. But first, let's shift to another key area, the Indian Ocean. You mentioned a sort of pirate renaissance there. After things had quieted down in the 2010s, what's behind that comeback?
Yeah, renaissance is a good word for it, unfortunately. After a period where increased naval patrols really suppressed activity, 2024 saw 8 incidents pop up again, and that included the first successful hijacking of a big merchant vessel since way back in 2017. And get this, it was executed 1,000 nautical miles from shore. They used motherships, larger vessels, to launch smaller attack boats from. Very sophisticated.
1,000 miles? How is that even possible?
Well, the underlying factors include Somalia still lacking a really strong, effective Coast Guard. Plus, there's ongoing conflict on land, including the influence of groups like al-Shabaab. And even in early 2025, there was a report of a, quote, suspicious approach in the Gulf of Aden. Multiple small boats, skiffs swarming a bulk carrier. So the threat is definitely still there in that historically troubled water.
Okay, so Gulf of Guinea, very violent, kidnapping-focused. Indian Ocean resurgence, long-range hijackings. What about the third area, Southeast Asia? Seems like the approach there is a bit different.
That's right. The focus there tends to be more on opportunistic theft, less on these dramatic, large-scale hijackings. Southeast Asia, especially around the Singapore Strait and the Malacca Strait, incredibly busy shipping lanes, saw 61 incidents in 2024. That was actually up slightly from 58 the previous year. And just in Q1 of 2025, there were 36 reported incidents. It's quite active.
And what are they after, if not the whole ship or crew?
Mostly it's armed robbery. They target ships, often when they're anchored, and steal things like engine parts, cables, maybe some cargo if it's accessible. Generally, the level of violence is lower compared to the Gulf of Guinea, but we are seeing an increase in pirates carrying weapons, like knives or machetes. There's a specific hotspot called the Phillip Channel, just off Pulau Kula in Indonesia. There were 12 incidents reported there just in January and February 2025 alone. This kind of piracy is often linked to, local economic issues, maybe some geopolitical tensions, like between Singapore and Indonesia's nearby islands. Creates opportunities for smaller, localized crime groups.
Okay, so we have these different hotspots, different methods. But it all sounds incredibly disruptive. You mentioned 80% of global trade value goes by sea. So what does this actually mean for us? What's the real cost here beyond the scary headlines? For trade, for the people involved?
Oh, the impact is huge. It ripples out far beyond just the ships attacked. Economically, piracy costs billions every single year. Think about things like increased insurance premiums for ships going through risky areas. There are specific war risk surcharges. Companies often have to divert ships, take longer, more expensive routes to avoid these zones. The IMB estimates these disruptions add thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, to fuel costs per voyage, plus delays in supply chains. And ultimately, that impacts the price you and I pay for goods. Almost everything travels by sea at some point. We saw a real spike in those war risk insurance requirements in 2024. Puts a massive strain on shipping companies.
Right, the economic side is clear, but the human toll. You touched on the kidnappings. That must be just immense. It's not just money, it's people's lives, their mental health.
Absolutely. The psychological trauma for the crews is profound and often very long-lasting. Take that 2024 incident off Cabo Verde we mentioned. 10 pirates, AK-47s, they tied up 21 crew members. They even used fake bomb threats to terrorize them. The IMB reported that huge 73% jump in hostage-taking from 2023 to 2024. Crews are often blindfolded, tied up, locked in tiny confined spaces for weeks, sometimes months. Imagine the terror, the uncertainty, these conditions, the long captivity. It severely impacts mental health. And remember, many seafarers are from developing nations under huge pressure to provide for their families. It's a terrifying ordeal that doesn't just end when or if they're released.
Just awful to think about. Okay, let's maybe look at a couple more recent examples, cases that really show how audacious these pirates are, how they keep adapting. What stands out lately?
Well, there was a really high-profile hijacking early in 2025 back in the Gulf of Guinea. Pirates seized a cargo vessel, held the cargo, demanded ransom. What was striking was the execution 200 nautical miles offshore. It showed real vulnerabilities, suggested they likely used speedboats launched from a mother ship, maybe even had insider intelligence about the ship's route or cargo.
So, planning again, not random.
Definitely planned. Then another alarming one back in December 2023 in the Indian Ocean. Somali pirates hijacking that bulk carrier 700 miles east of Bosaso. That really signaled a bold return after years of relative quiet from Somali groups. And even in Southeast Asia, which we said is often less violent. In January 2025, there was a robbery at an anchorage in Bangladesh. Pirates boarded with knives, stole equipment, threatened the crew. Still incredibly frightening for those on board.
So what do these incidents tell us? Is there a common thread in their tactics, how they exploit weaknesses?
Yeah, they consistently show the pirates' adaptability. They absolutely exploit darkness. They target ships with smaller crews, what they call skeleton crews. They look for gaps in naval patrols or surveillance coverage. They make rapid targeted attacks when they see an opportunity. It really is a constant cat and mouse game. They're always probing for the weakest link, looking for that window where defenses are down or patrols are elsewhere.
Okay, so it's a persistent, adaptive threat. What are the good guys doing about it? Are the international efforts actually working, or are we just, playing catch up?
Well, there are significant efforts underway. It's a mix of international naval forces and regional cooperation. And the results, they're mixed, but often quite encouraging in specific areas. You have forces like Combined Task Force 151, that's CTF 151. It's a big coalition, like 38 nations involved. They actively patrol high-risk areas like the Gulf of Aden. They do convoy escorts, use helicopters. It definitely deters attacks. Then there's the European Union Naval Force Atalanta, UNAVFOR Atalanta. They've been really effective against Somali piracy specifically. They actually reported no successful attacks at all between June and December 2024 in their area. And we also see joint exercises like the Africa-India Maritime Engagement Exercise in April 2025, focused specifically on anti-piracy drills, improving how different navies can work together.
And what about closer to the hot spots? Any regional initiatives making a difference?
Yes, definitely. In the Gulf of Guinea, there's something called the Yaoundé Process. It's basically a regional security agreement. Along with efforts by ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, they've really boosted regional patrols. And it seems to be working, to an extent. Incidents there dropped from 81 back in 2020 down to just 18 in 2024. That's a big improvement. There was even a notable multinational operation in 2024 where they intercepted a pirate vessel, rescued hostages, and actually disrupted a whole Nigerian pirate network. Over in Southeast Asia, you have RECAP. That's the Regional Cooperation Agreement on Combating Piracy and Armed Robbery against Ships in Asia. Its main job is facilitating intelligence sharing between countries, which is crucial. Though coverage gaps do still exist in some places, like the Eastern Indian Ocean.
Okay, so naval patrols, regional cooperation. Sounds like a lot is being done. Which raises the obvious question, why is piracy still such a persistent problem? Why does it endure despite all these efforts?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It persists because of these really deep-seated, difficult issues. Things like corruption in some coastal states. Limited naval resources, many nations just don't have the ships or manpower to patrol effectively. Plus, complex jurisdictional disputes. Whose water is it? Who has the right to pursue pirates? Especially tricky in West Africa. And, as we've said, the pirates themselves are getting smarter. They use jamming equipment now to block communications. They've even been known to make fake distress calls to lure patrol boats away from where they plan to strike. So it's not just about having warships out there. It's tackling corruption, boosting local capacity, untangling legal knots, and countering their evolving tactics.
Right, a multifaceted problem. What about technology and the law itself? How are they being used beyond just the patrols?
Technology is playing a bigger and bigger role for sure. Things like AIS, the automatic identification systems that broadcast a ship's position, its identity, and SAS, ship security alert systems. Those are like silent alarms, sending distress signals directly to authorities. Both help with real-time tracking and faster response. Drones are being used more for surveillance, satellites too. Malaysia, for example, has a dedicated 24/7 piracy command center in Kuala Lumpur. They provide live threat info, coordinate with navies, and then there's the whole issue of PCASP privately contracted armed security personnel, basically armed guards on ships. They've proven quite effective as a deterrent statistically, but their use does raise legal questions, especially about rules of engagement, liability, operating within a country's territorial waters. It's complex.
And the legal framework overall.
Well, legally, piracy on the high seas in international waters falls under UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. That's the main global framework. But armed robbery within a country's territorial waters, that gets much trickier because of national sovereignty and jurisdiction. Prosecuting pirates caught in those situations can be really difficult. There are agreements like the Djibouti Code of Conduct in East Africa and the Indian Ocean aimed at improving cooperation and intelligence sharing, but honestly, inconsistent enforcement sometimes limits their overall impact.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here? It sounds like even in 2025, with all our technology and international cooperation, the oceans aren't entirely safe. The seven seas are still, in a way, contested waters. Vigilance is key.
That's a very good way to put it. Modern pirates, they are absolutely not relics of the past. They are a persistent, sophisticated, adaptable threat.
Yeah. From the really brutal kidnappings in the Gulf of Guinea to these resurgent hijackings in the Indian Ocean, the opportunistic theft in Southeast Asia, they keep evolving, adapting with, frankly, alarming speed.
And the costs are immense. Billions in economic losses, which affects global trade and consumers. And the human cost. The trauma inflicted on crews is just devastating and often overlooked.
Right. And well, the naval patrols, the regional cooperation, the technology, they've definitely made a dent, curbed incidents in some key areas.
Critical gaps remain: weak governance in some regions, lack of resources, the pirates' own ingenuity. It all allows piracy to endure.
Those recent attacks are just stark reminders, aren't they, that this battle for maritime security, it's definitely not over.
Not by a long shot.
So for you listening, we really encourage you to keep exploring topics like this maritime security, the complexities of global trade, because understanding these challenges, well, that's really the first step toward finding better solutions and safeguarding our shared oceans.